For the first time in 8 long years, NHL players are going to participate in a best on best international hockey tournament. Hunter Hodies and I are here to break it all down.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL. I am Nick Zararis, the host of Locked On Oilers. That is Hunter Hodies, one of the co-hosts of Locked On Penguins. We want to thank everyone who's making Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Locked On NHL, a part Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, where you can enjoy the NFL season with a big return. New customers can place a $5 bet. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, Hunter, you and I have been talking about this for a year and a half now because we're both really excited about this because this is the purest form of hockey experimentation there is. You know, we're going to really get to do the whole, does grit matter or would you rather load up a superstar team? We're going to get a real practical case study of this, where you let NHL general managers be in charge of each of these teams and pick from anyone they wanted that was eligible. And this is who they determined this is the best lineup we can bring. And look, I know everybody loves to quote the line from Miracle, I'm not looking for the best players, I'm looking for the right one. They still had to be good, though. You know, that's the thing that people miss there. Yes, you do want specialized players. You do want guys who are good at certain things. That's true. But when you go and look at it, Hunter, the last time we had a best on best tournament, you know what Canada's checking line was? Canada's checking line was Brad Marchand, Sidney Crosby, and Patrice Bergeron. The last time we did this, we said we're going to get the best players in the world, and they're going to all want to play with each other. So they're going to be willing to do things like play defense and back check. You know, we do this every 4 years with the Olympics in basketball of, well, maybe we should bring some 3-and-D wings. No. We're going to bring LeBron, we're going to bring KD, and everybody's going to want to play with those guys. So guys like Derek White are going to come and they're going to want to play defense. People like Devin Booker are going to want to come and play defense. You know, we'll start with Finland here in the first segment. We're going to go Finland, Sweden, Canada, USA across. We're not going to be as tight on this for this segment because 4-3 doesn't make it natural as easy of a break. But looking at this Finland roster, pretty good. Like, I really like the identity this team has as being a strong possession team that has it's probably a little on the slow side, but they're very methodical. They've got a really nice group. You know, when you can run Barkov, Aho down the middle, that's pretty solid. You know, that's a really good 1-2 punch. You have good tertiary players like Capo Kakko and Teuvo Teravainen. You've got a genuine bona fide superstar in Mikko Rantanen up front as well. You've got one of the more underrated goalie tandems in Saros and Pekka Luukkonen. I know Saros hasn't played great this year. And you've got one of the blue chip defensemen to anchor it all, Miro Heiskanen. Sure, their defense probably leaves a little bit to be desired once you get past Heiskanen, but this is a really talented group for what's the fourth best team.
Yeah, no, Finland can put together a really, really good roster here. You know, they're probably going to put Rantanen with Barkov on the top line. And I'm excited to see, man, what Barkov does against some of these better teams, at least on paper. I want to see how he goes up against McDavid, against Crosby, against Matthews for Team USA, you know, against all the big dogs on Sweden as well. That's going to be a lot of fun to see. And again, I want Rantanen on that top line. I think those two together, Nick, that's going to be a deadly 1-2 combo. You can even put Teravainen, if you want to, on that line as well. You can also put Teravainen, I think, with Aho on the second line. You know, you also have Rupe Hintz on this team as well. That is a big luxury for Finland. So you look up and down this forward group. I'm also super happy for Patrick Laine that he got on this team. You saw the big pop that he had at the Bell Center this week for the goal that he scored. It's so great that he is on this team for Finland, and I'm excited to see what he can do. Defensively, yeah, it's Heiskanen, and it's
a bunch of threes and fours. It's a bunch of threes and fours.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of threes and fours and an elite defenseman.
Right. Heiskanen is the anchor. Esa Lindell is still, I feel like, very good. But outside of that, you're right. It's a lot of number 3, number 4, maybe number 5 defensemen. But they do have the answer in net in UC Saros. I know UC Saros has not had the best start to the year this year, but also Nashville has been flat out bad to start this year. But he is still, when he is on top of his game, that is a top 5 goaltender on the planet. And with that type of team in front of him, I think he's going to have a really good showing in this tournament. Some people may be sleeping on Finland. I say don't, because this team is really talented.
Look, we all know the NHL has set this up so they get Canada, USA in the final.
Yes.
That's the way this bracket is set up. It would be very NHL to get Sweden, Finland in the final after going out of their way to set it up where it would be really easy to get Canada and America to be the final in Boston the second week of the tournament. But like looking at it on paper, the thing that jumps out to me about this Finland team, and this will be the last thought on Finland before we start moving towards Sweden, they have the means to play a very possession-based defense-first game. And I feel like that's kind of how you have to approach these tournaments when you're the underhanded or the less talented team, if you will. You know, that's always been kind of the secret sauce in hockey when you're the under-equipped team. You want to slow these games down. You want to make the other team really work for their offense. And when you can throw Barkov and Rantanen out there together, you can stop other teams' best lines. Now, your secondary guys are going to need to do things, but the fact you have guys like Rope Hintz, you have Capo Caco, hell, you have Anton Lundell down there in your lineup as well.
Great third line player.
They have really solid depth on this team. And look, they have an uphill battle, no doubt. They don't have the high-end talent that some of these other teams in this tournament do. You know, once you get past Barkov and Rantanen and Heiskanen, there is a bit of a drop-off to the next guy. But they have the style of play requisite with pulling off upsets, especially because you've got the goalie, especially because all of these guys have similar styles where they're going to play a lot of cycle. They're going to try and wear you down. You know, there is a large contingent of Dallas Stars on this team. There's a large contingent of Carolina Hurricanes, and there is a contingent of Florida Panthers. All three of those teams are heavy possession, cycle, forecheck teams. And I don't think it's a coincidence that that's your recipe for success if you're this type of team. And I think that's a good thing. And the last thing I want to say on this, it's hard to get all of these guys up to speed to play the same way because you have all of, 3-4 days of practice to run together, because all these guys are going to come from their respective teams. And it's hard to get up to speed with what other guys want to do. Some of these guys have never played together before. And the first game they're going to play is against another team that really hasn't played a lot together. So it's going to be a really interesting case theory in our ongoing conversations. Does the style matter more? Do you need the talent? We talk about that all the time, especially come the playoffs, of you can be a sublimely talented team, but if you play a team that plays this cycle, grind it out, make you work hard, they wear you down, man. Like, you can make an argument that the Rangers were more talented than the Panthers last year on paper. The Panthers grinded them into a pulp over the course of 6 games. Finland very well could grind some of these more talented teams into a pulp, frustrate them, and force them into a lot of mistakes.
No, I agree. And you talk about defense first as well. I kind of see that here with Sweden as well, just to transition the conversation to Team Sweden. There is a real argument that this could be the winner at the end of this Four Nations Faceoff. This Swedish team is really good. They're going to give every team a hell of a fight, including Canada and the United States. But you look at up and down this lineup, Nick. You have Philip Forsberg, one of the top goal scorers in the league. Elias Pettersson, who's awesome. You have Elias Lindholm there, William Nylander, always a threat off the rush. You have Jesper Bratt, Victor Arvidsson, but defensively, that's where I think this team really shines. Erik Karlsson, Matthias Ekholm, Rasmus Dahlin, Jonas Brodin, Gustav Forsling, Victor Hedman. Need I say more? This is, I think, going to be a very defensive first team. Yeah, I know you have Erik Karlsson in there who really doesn't play defense that much at this point, but you have other players in that defensive group that are very good in their own zone, namely Gustav Forsling. I still think he's one of the most underrated defensemen in the league. More people need to realize just how good Gustav Forsling really is. Ekholm, he's great in his own zone. You have Jonas Brodin, he's also good in his own zone. This is going to be a very tough team to play against with how stingy I think they'll be defensively and how they can hurt you forechecking wise and off the rush. They have the players that can punish you off the rush, like Nylander, like a Forsberg. You have players that can work down low, like a Lucas Raymond, like a Pettersson, like a William Karlsson. And then they also, I think, have 3 really good goalies. You can honestly make a case, Nick, for any one of these 3 goalies to start. I think right now, if I had to pick one as my starter for international, I'm probably going Linus Ullmark. That might be a hot take to some because Gustafsson's been really good this year for Minnesota. But with what Ullmark was able to do in Boston before coming to Ottawa, and I know it hasn't been quite the same, you put Ullmark behind this team with this defense, I think he'll feast. I would start Ullmark if I were Team Sweden, but again, that's just one man's opinion. But I really like the makings of this Swedish team.
We're going to take our first and only break of today's episode, and we will be right back. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Tonight, we got a really good game. We've got the Packers going to Detroit to take on the Lions, with the presumptive Super Bowl favorite Detroit Lions are 3.5-point favorites. The best game of the weekend, though, is over Sunday night. Justin Herbert and the Chargers going to Arrowhead to take on the 2-time defending Super Bowl champion Chiefs, where the Chiefs are 3.5-point favorites. All of that over at FanDuel.com, where you can get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. It's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Enjoying this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL, where we are breaking down all things for Nations Faceoff. And it's really interesting when we get to these teams, because when you compare them to the last time around, I'm looking at the Sweden lineup from the World Cup of Hockey in 2016. Their first line was Philip Forsberg, Nick Backstrom, Patrick Hornquist, Victor Hedman, and Anton Strawman. That was the first line Sweden rolled out. And then the second line was the Sedin brothers and Louis Eriksson with Mattias Ekholm and Erik Karlsson, Carl Hagelin, Marcus Kruger, Jakob Silverberg, OEL, Nick Hjalmarsson, and their fourth line was Carl Soderberg, Patrick Berglund, and Gabe Landeskog. We are talking about a vastly different NHL than what we are looking at now. And on this Sweden team, you mentioned it, but the collection of talent on the back end for Sweden, the nation of Sweden needs to be paying Nicklas Lidstrom royalties for the rest of his natural born life, because every single kid who grew up in Sweden from about 1995 till 2010 saw that guy play hockey and said, I want to be a defenseman because you can do that. And you are seeing the fruits of that. You see Hedman and Karlsson, 2 of the defining defensemen of their respective eras. Hedman's, I would say, is probably better in the present, but Karlsson is not nearly as bad as he's perceived to be. It's more of a team thing, holding down the opinion of Karlsson.
Analysts saying that, Erik Karlsson shouldn't be on this team. I'm
that's crazy. That's
what?
Crazy.
He brings so much offense still.
If you want to say Erik Karlsson is more of a specialist now, where you're not going to play him on the first pair, but you still want him to run the power play, yeah, sure. If you want to use him in the role I would have said Evan Bouchard should be on Canada, okay, where he's on the third pair, he's going to run the power play, but Canada has Cale Makar, so they don't really need a second power play specialist. I'm excited to see Dahlin in this format. I'm very curious to see if they're going to play him on the left or the right, because they're bringing 4 left-handed defensemen and they only have 2 right-handed defensemen, so I'll be curious to see how that shakes out. The forward group's dynamic, man. Jesper Bratt, Willie Nylander, those boys are nice. You got Forsberg in there as well, who can hoop, man. Forsberg was in the high 40s for goals last year. That's one of the more high-end dynamic players. And like you said, this is a good goalie room, man. You got Markstrom in there. You got Ullmark in there. And hell, what I just said about Lidstrom, it's the same thing with Lundqvist. An entire generation of Swedes saw Lundqvist cook on the international stage. They won a gold medal in 2006. One of the 2 times that Canada hasn't won the gold medal since they started letting NHL players go to the Olympics. And it is going to be a fascinating case study, because this team on paper it has the goods. This group absolutely can hang with the other three, and I'd argue their dynamic talent gives them a little bit more of an edge in a way that I don't necessarily, even though what I said about Finland, that their style I think is going to fit well in a short tournament because it's going to be very simple and it's going to wear teams down. Sweden's got dynamic players, and when we get into these best on best tournaments where it's about who can hoop, who can make a play, you want guys like Jesper Bratt, Willie Nylander, Philip Forsberg in the trenches with you. You want Elias Pettersson in the trenches with you because those are the guys, when the game's hanging in the balance, that's who you need to make a play.
Agreed. No, 100%. And again, these players can also really hurt you off the rush. If these other teams aren't careful and they're too careless with the puck and you give them too many on-man rush opportunities, Sweden as a team can really make you pay, especially with all those players out there that are great in the NHL off the rush. Again, you also have someone like a Lucas Raymond who has been great for the Red Wings. He's a great forechecker. He's great at getting those pucks from down low to high. He's been fantastic. Kempe's a really good scorer. Wild Bill is obviously great. This is going to be a really fun team to watch. I would not be surprised in the slightest if Sweden won this. I'm not going to pick them to win it, but I still wouldn't be surprised if they did.
Okay, it's time for our first real deep conversation about Team Canada. You and I have spent a lot of time talking about this over the last few months. We've gone back and forth, both on the show, texting back and forth over the weeks, trying to discern what exactly Don Sweeney's vision was, because we had heard earlier in the season, I forget if it was an Elliot Friedman or a Chris Johnson report of, don't be surprised if they bring Tom Wilson, don't be surprised if they bring some more bigger and physical players. And I think Canada, and this isn't meant to be derisive the way I say this, but they really went heavy on the specialists. They really went heavy on guys for one specific role. And look, there's nobody who's a bigger proponent of the Bill Belichick, do your job, don't do someone else's job, do your job than me. I'm a staunch believer. Teams put guys in positions to fail when they just assume they can do things they've never done before. But looking at this group, you have got some real niche dogs. When you got guys like Brandon Hagel and Travis Konechny and Anthony Cirelli, you have got, and Sam Bennett for that matter, you have got some real grindy dogs who are going to be a pain in the ass to play against.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Bennett, he's going to piss off all three other countries in this event, and it's going to be hilarious to watch. He does this with Florida. He's going to do this with Canada. It's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to see some people out there that say, oh, he may not deserve to make it over some other more talented guys.
Oh, he doesn't on talent. If we're doing talent, no, come on. You bring Nick Suzuki.
Right.
There are a lot of guys you could make an argument. In all honesty, if you wanted that, Tom Wilson's having a better start to his season than Sam Bennett. If you really wanted to do the tough guy thing, Tom Wilson could have been here. Dylan Strome could have been here. There are guys who are having better seasons, but Canada believes in this. So like we said at the outset, this is a good case study.
It is. And I still think Sam Bennett is a totally fine player to bring just because of the way he plays and how he's going to piss everyone off. And of course, he can still very much score. He's a great player. But you look up and down this lineup. You can roll McDavid at number one. You can put Sid at two. Heck, Nick, you can put McKinnon as your second line center if you want and move Sid down to the third line. They can really do so much. But at the end of the day, you're probably going to have Crosby with Marchand because those two love playing together. At all those past international events, do you remember who Sidney Crosby played with? It was Marchand and Bergeron every time. He played with those two. They love playing with Sid. You're going to see Sid with Marchand again, and those two are going to be a pain in the ass to play against. You might put maybe McKinnon on his other wing if you want to. Canada has so many different options that they can roll out there. Again, you can go, if you want, McDavid, Crosby, McKinnon. You can go McDavid, Crosby with McKinnon on Crosby's wing. You can do so much with this team. You can put Reinhart on one of those top two lines. You can put Marner, of course, on McDavid's wing. I think if I were Team Canada, I would put Marner on McDavid's wing. That's going to be a crap ton of fun. Defensively, obviously, I think you're going to have Taves and Makar on the top pair, maybe Morrissey and Theodore on another one. If it were up to me, I would not have brought both Parayko and Sanheim. I would have brought one of Bouchard or Dougie Hamilton. I understand that people keep thinking that, Bouchard doesn't play defense. Bouchard doesn't play defense. And also you have a top power play quarterback in Makar. I very much get that. He's not going to get top power play time, but I would still rather have Bouchard on this team if I'm Canada rather than both of Parayko and Sanheim. Again, That's just me. That's my opinion. And also, you can make the same case for Hamilton. He's better defensively, I still would think, than Bouchard. Still brings a lot of offense. I still feel like he would have a spot on this team too. So it's an interesting case study. I would have brought at least one of them. I'm not the general manager though, but we got to talk about it, man. Canada's goaltending. Ooh, that's no longer do you have Carey Price anymore, Team Canada. You don't have that safety valve in net. It's going to be one of Sam Montembeault, Aiden Hill, or Jordan Binnington. If I had to take a stab at this right now and guess who will start, I'm going to go with Binnington. Yeah, you could go Aiden Hill because he also has a Stanley Cup winning experience, but I'm going to go Binnington, at least with his play over this year and last year. But that's just me. But when you compare this goalie situation compared to the other three teams, it's not the greatest, to say the least.
It's the weakest amongst them. We're going to take one last quick break. Be right back. We're going to finish up Canada, and then we'll talk about the Stars and Stripes. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out here on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL, where Hunter, Hodies, and I are just absolutely ecstatic to be talking about best on best international hockey. It was funny while you were talking about all the different permutations they could play Sid with. I in the back of my mind, I was thinking about when I was a little kid and a family member who I didn't see all the time would come over and we'd be like, can we do something? Can we do something? And your uncle comes over like, can we play catch? Can we play video games? Can we play put on some music? And that's kind of the thing I'm picturing. Everybody just beating down the door, being like, can I get to play with Sid? Marcia, and can me and Sid stay together? Well, Marner wants to play with him. You've heard McDavid say, I want to play with Sid. Hell, McDavid said, I'll play the wing if that's what it takes for me to play with Sid. I imagine the same thing for McKinnon. This is going to be so much fun. We have been deprived of McDavid, McKinnon, and Sid on the same team for way too long. We thought this was going to happen at some point. It should not have taken 9 years to get that to finally happen, because McKinnon is 2013 and then McDavid's 2015. We've gone 10 years in the life cycle. We should have had 2 Olympic cycles where these guys were all on the same team. As far as the goaltending, like you said, it's a lot of question marks. It's very average. I would say it's probably the weakest goalie room amongst the 4 teams in this tournament. I think that's why Canada has leaned so heavily on the defense guys and guys like Cirelli and Bennett and Konechny, if you will, who are a little more defense oriented to try and take some of the heat off of their goalie room. All right, Hunter, let's talk about the Stars and Stripes. This is the best American hockey team of my lifetime. I was not alive for the 1996 World Cup of Hockey. I know there are a lot of people who say that's the best American hockey team ever assembled. On paper, it might be. This group has the goods to beat Canada. This is the first time in my entire life going into one of these tournaments or an Olympics where I feel America is arguably a more talented team. And America left good players off the board, man. America did not bring their best possible team. They didn't bring Tage. They didn't bring Caulfield. They opted for they opted for specialists. Kreider, the net front power play. Trocheck, the best face-off guy in the league. Brock Nelson, somebody a lot of playoff experience, plays with a little bit of juice to his game. This is a great team, man. And the defense, look, I know Adam Fox and Charlie McAvoy aren't off to great starts this year, but those guys, Slavin, Werenski's quietly having a Norris caliber season in Columbus right now. This is a really talented team. And then you've got the best goalie in the league right now in net.
Right, 100%. I feel like Team USA mostly got this right. It's not like 2016, Nick, where you bring Brandon Dubinsky and Justin Abdelkader over Phil Kessel for reasons. I guess you want to try to outgrit Canada when Canada just brought their best team to the World Cup of Hockey that year. It's not at that level, but there are still a couple of misses, at least in my opinion. I would have brought in one of Tage Thompson or Cole Caulfield over one of the 2 Rangers forwards. I don't think Kreider is off to that good of a start this year. Trocheck has been fine, hasn't been that good this year compared to last year, but I still don't think you needed to take both Rangers players. I think you could have left one off the board. I actually don't mind Brock Nelson being there. He's been, I think, pretty underrated in the NHL these last several years, been a really good goal scorer on an Islanders team that usually can't score that often. So I'm totally fine with him being there. It's just one of the 2 Rangers players I think could have been left at home in favor of Tage, who's off to a great start, and then Cole Caulfield, who earlier this week, again, he was tied for 3rd in the league in goals. He's off to one heck of a start this year. So that's just my a small gripe about this team. But when you really get down to it, by far the most talented USA team of my lifetime. The fact that they can go, Jack Hughes and Austin Matthews as a 1-2 punch down the middle is just.
And you still got Eichel. And look, I this might be recency bias because I've watched Vegas 2 nights in a row. Jack Eichel's kind of an elite defensive center now. Like he had McDavid in the torture rack on Tuesday night. There was not a lick of space out there on the ice. And if you've got guys like Eichel willing to play defense, if you've got Matthews, and you can kind of just sprinkle Jack Hughes in as like your offensive third line center, you've got the Tkachuk brothers. Like, come on, this is what it's all about. It's all about.
You can really go Matthews, Hughes, Eichel, or you can interchange Hughes and Eichel however you want. That is,
you can put Hughes on the wing if you're worried about faceoffs, and because I know that's definitely a point of contention. They have so much opportunity here, and like you said, they got this right for the most part. I agree with you. I wouldn't have brought both of the Ranger guys. I don't think. I think Trocheck has a weird profile where because he hits people, he has this perception of being a good defensive center, when in reality, if you go look at the underlying numbers, him and Panarin, though they've put up incredible counting stats the last 2 years, they give almost just as much back defensively as they create offensively. So I'll be very curious to see how they end up allocating this talent throughout this group. They brought a bunch of centers. We didn't mention JT Miller, who can play center. You have Trocheck, you have Dylan Larkin, you have Jack Hughes, Austin Matthews. They're bringing a lot of centers, which generally is what we see in these tournaments. I'll be very curious to see how they distribute those guys throughout the lineup. I'm very glad Matt Boldy and Brock Faber made this team. I know Bill Guerin is their general manager and the general manager of this team, but I do think it is important. And I think this is also why Canada brought Seth Jarvis. I think it's important that even if those types of guys aren't going to play big roles on this specific iteration, being that they probably have roles on future iterations, whether it be the Olympics in 26 or the Olympics in 2030, it's good to have those guys around the team for the vibes and so that they get to sink it in. They get to absorb what the ideas are. There's this old school thing. It doesn't really exist in sports anymore because there's so much roster turnover, but the idea of institutional knowledge where you stay in one place for a long time, you absorb as much as you possibly can, and then it's your responsibility as one of the older guys on a team to take somebody like a Seth Jarvis, a Brock Faber, a Matt Boldy, and pull them aside and be like, this is how we do this here. You are going to be one of the guys on this team down the road. 4 or 5 years from now, Brock Faber might be the best defenseman in the entire NHL. It is not out of the question that he has that trajectory. So it's important that even if he's the 7th defenseman on this team or only plays sparingly, that he has the experience of being here so that when the time comes and he's one of the older guys on this team, he can do the same thing for that next wave of guys. It's the same reason you bring Seth Jarvis if you're Canada. You want him around Sidney Crosby and Brad Marchand because that type of institutional knowledge from all of these international tournaments, it's important you can pass that down.
Yeah, and I do think Faber's probably going to play a bit more, I would say, during the 26 Olympics and then in 2030 as well. Because right now, you look at this lineup for defensemen right now, Fox and Hughes, they're obviously going to play. McAvoy, Slavin, they're obviously going to be in there as well. If I had to guess, they're probably going to put Hanifin and Werenski in there too. Faber might be a scratch for at least that first game. But it's not going to be the end of the world. He's going to be on these future Team USA teams. And you mentioned the goaltending. Best goaltending, I think, of these 4 teams. Hellebuck, he is fantastic, but even if you don't go to him, Nick, Ottinger and Swayman, when they're both on top of their games, they're both 2 of the best goaltenders on the planet. So,
and you still got Demko. If he were healthy, he could be in this argument too.
Yeah, 100%. And one last thing, man, I need to see Brady and Matthew Tkachuk play together to piss off Team Canada. Can we please get that, sir? Because that's going to be a ton of fun. I want to see JT Miller in this lineup because I know he's obviously going through a little bit right now, but when he is on top of his game, he deserves to be in this top 12. And I know some people are down on Mike Sullivan a bit lately, and I totally understand why with how the Penguins have played this year, last year and all that. But you give him a team like this, he's going to coach them up. Trust me. With this much talent, I think he's going to have them humming.
It'll be very interesting to see how that narrative and that dynamic goes, because I agree with you. And this will be the last thing before we get out of here, I still think Mike Sullivan is a good coach.
Yes.
And good coaches can run their course. Belichick's the best coach in the history of professional football. And even he, after a while, had worn thin on people. Greatness has a toll, and eventually it catches up with you. I think there's a reason the Penguins won't do this in season, and frankly, why I think they're going to ride it out with him. They know he's a good coach, and he's getting picked up in 5 minutes the same way that Jim Montgomery did. If you fired Mike Sullivan today, the Rangers would fire Peter Laviolette 100% to hire Mike Sullivan. I think there's more than one team you could make an argument would do that. So with that note, we will absolutely revisit this topic down the road in the next few weeks before the tournament itself goes. We'll definitely do a deep dive on each of these teams, the strengths, the weaknesses, who we want to see play with who, because that's the fun of these international tournaments, is getting to put together these dream lines and dream defensive pairs. I know I have spent a lot of time over the last few months thinking about who I would play with who. But that'll do it for today's edition of Locked On NHL. Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen of the day. Please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Now, if you could be so kind, for your second listen of the day, go check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast, where you can get all the tips you need to dominate your league mates, catch up with Steal and Flip, win your fantasy hockey league this year. Hunter and I will talk to you guys next week.